What is the benefit to that?
To not talking.
To not talking.
Well, you can keep your... Okay, this is gonna... I guess I should preface this that I've been...
No preface necessary.
Well, the last couple of days I've been watching a lot of the... you guys know anything about the 48 Laws of Power?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, one of the big things is the idea of concealment of attention and not letting others onto what you're truly wanting from them, per se. And silence is a big part of that, because, as they say, the more you talk, and I've fallen privy to this one many a time, the more you talk, the more chance you leave to look a fool, let's say.
You expose yourself more often.
Exactly.
More openings.
So the less you let out, the less people can read into where it is you actually stand on something. Now, some of these things are a little bit like, they tread the line of what we would consider a good sense of morality, because the idea is that, like, some of it's pretty craven and pretty Machiavellian, let's say.
Give me an example.
Well, I mean, one of the laws, for example, is just talking about, never do something yourself you can get others to do, and always take credit for whatever is accomplished.
Yeah, that's a little much.
Right? Like, I mean, and there's a lot of things in there like that that are very, very cold and very calculated and very...
Well, if you're just looking for self-advancement at any cost.
Well, that's the problem. I don't want to say the problem with that book, but you listen to the title, like 48 Laws of Power.
Yeah.
So the idea of power being the, in my opinion, comical. Like, power, we have no power. We get hit by a solar flare and all of our perceived power is gone. Power is internal. Power is all the way that you view your own ego, flexing itself on the world.
I don't know, man. There's power in belief in yourself. Like I have done some crazy shit just because I believed I could. There's no reason why. Like,
I'm just saying the more like the loftier side.
Oh, I know.
That's all the here and now.
You pan out. None of us are worth anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's part of it too, though. Like, that's not the only thing I've been watching. I've watching a ton of stuff, like I said, on like super high, like double speed, to just like crank through.
Yeah.
And there's other reasons I've been doing that, but one of the other things that I have been coming across over and over is the idea of accepting that none of this matters, because, like, whenever you're worried and stressed out about what's going on in your life, what's going on around you, they say to take a step back and just imagine yourself out in the universe or on the moon or on a space shuttle looking back at Earth and going, what happens there affects none of the rest of this. So, in a certain philosophical sense, you're already dead and everything you've done is meaningless. Even Alexander, there was a quote I heard that was, I'm going to butcher it probably, but upon death, Alexander the Great and his mule driver essentially amounted to the same thing when they were gone. They were dust, they were,
yeah.
You know what I mean? So, I mean, one of the greatest conquerors that had ever existed, and one was a lowly servant mule driver, so to speak, but they ended up in the same place. At the end of the day, we all go to the same place. So what we accomplish here, in some sense, doesn't matter in the long run, but at the same time, you're here for a duration of time, so what you make of this is really up to you.
I do this every day, multiple times a day, where I'm actively realizing the moment is already gone.
Yeah.
I talked about this last week quite a bit, but, like, if I'm in a bad moment, I'm a lot of the time just like, well, this is already behind me. I'm here, so it's over. Because when was the last time an hour lasted that long?
Right? Well, it doesn't, right?
It just becomes a memory.
It depends. Well, it depends. Like, time is just obviously it's a perception of whoever is observing it. So I mean, if you're doing something fun, it's something you enjoy, time passes quickly. If you're doing something you really don't enjoy and you're not having a good time with, time passes very, very slowly, right?
If you see your life as, I've had X amount of terrible days and I'm still here, you can kind of action that in the moment of suffering and be like, oh, I'm going to survive this just like I did every other time.
Yeah,
And I'll be in bed eating Cheetos or something later, you know?
well, they say that's one of the tenets of long-lasting happiness is not being worried about.
Oh, yeah.
Like knowing that, like having just an internal sense that no matter what happens, everything will be okay. And I mean, it's hard to wrap my mind around that initially because, you know.
A lot of people go too far with it where they're like, no matter what happens, things will be good. No, things won't. No, it's not no matter what happens, things will be good.
Things will be.
Things will be. You will be
Yeah.
here tomorrow. So say
You'll survive.
yeah,
Like,
you'll
it's
just
not-
be back to default again. So when you've done that enough times, at some point you should start going, oh, okay, this is just the same as it was last time when I was suffering. But it's scary when you get there because it doesn't pardon the happy moments either, right? Like all of a sudden you're thinking that way on your happiest moment ever too. Like you'll be having the best day of your life going, oh, well, this is going to be over tomorrow.
Yeah, back to the norm.
Yeah, you take a week off work and you're thinking of all this time off you've got and all these things you're going to do, and you're like, yeah, but I'll be back to work in a week.
So that's tricky because you're describing one way of looking at it that can facilitate. Like technically, they did a movie about this. It was Click,
Oh, yeah.
which like the idea of things that don't matter you want to skip through, and that's what you're describing a little bit. The idea that things like we can selectively choose to bypass suffering. And the scary idea of if you get too good at viewing things as in the past while they're present, you're going to get into a place where all of the things that you...
That's what's happened to me.
So then my argument to you would be if you want to enjoy good things, you have to also not skip bad things.
I don't know if I'm sure if I actively tried to slow it down, there's a potential that I could engage with it a little more. But I don't know if it's a better thing.
Why?
Because I don't know that, I think that there's probably more suffering in a life than there is joy.
Okay, so I'll get real philosophical.
I mean,
What's suffering?
well, suffering would be anything that you don't enjoy doing. Like, let's keep it real broad.
Okay,
Have you ever
why-
heard of antinatalism?
Yeah,
Yeah, we've talked about that, right?
but why don't you enjoy it?
Well, because it's hard, it hurts you,
Why is that negative?
it makes you upset. Because, well, why isn't it negative?
It's your just internal perception of it, right?
I mean, it leaves.
I like
right?
Our emotional connection to anything is what's going to give you the sensation of viewing it in a positive light or viewing it in a
But
negative light.
before we go too much farther down that road, I don't mind suffering. I'm not saying I can't stand being in pain or anything like that. Really, I'm just saying that I'm not doing it on purpose to avoid suffering. I'm doing it kind of naturally.
But this is like I'm just gonna keep prodding at it because it's fun. So that's something that you've developed.
As a defense mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Survival.
But a defense mechanism is one of those things where, like, we build them habitually, like we build them over time and over repetition to facilitate us in certain areas of life.
Yeah.
And then the problem is that when you build the wall is both sides.
Oh, I know.
So it doesn't just affect one area of your life; it affects multiple. So my curiosity would be, yeah, that serves a purpose within that specificity, but would you be able to remove that wall and gain something by having
for
that
sure.
wall removed?
I think that the problem for me is it didn't come from trauma that you would assume. It didn't come from relationships or father issues or mother issues or anything like that. It came from my job.
Mhm.
Like, it's always
It's the same.
and not just the same, but it's always high stress. People are always angry. People are always fighting. It's always like that. Like, it's nonstop. There's something to be angry about if the doors are open.
Holy shit, man! It's making food. Why would that be
Because
the thing?
people are in a hurry. Things have to be done in a certain amount of
Yeah,
time.
it doesn't matter what the industry is. I mean, there's a certain amount of stress, but a lot of it also comes from people just where their mindsets are.
Yeah.
If you're coming from a place of negativity all the time,
And that's what it is.
you're always
You're gonna put that back up.
you're gonna put that back. I mean, I see that at work too, right?
Yeah, of course. Oh man, I
Sell guitars.
don't miss that.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I won't name names, but there are some people that I'm starting to kind of
Are you
put a little
familiar
more
with?
distance with myself just
Yeah.
because of their
Negative
outlook on
vibe.
life, and just they say that's infectious. And
Yeah,
it's
of
also
course.
one of the things is
Because like you
surround
want to,
yourself with that. It becomes you.
well, and like we all want to reaffirm that the way that we view the world is correct because
Mm-hmm.
it makes us feel safe. So people that view the world negatively want to convince those around them that they should also view it negatively, so that they are given that like ticked box of like I'm safe and I'm right. And,
Well,
like that's
And it absolves them from having to become better.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, and that's like when you guys are talking about suffering, you're talking about bad stuff, it's like it has the potential, I think when you're in the middle of it, it's really, it seems not good. It seems very, very negative and you know, what positive could come from it. But realistically, people, you know, they say the most interesting people are the people that have had very rough experiences, right? People that tend to accomplish the most don't usually come from, you know, places of happiness and comfort, to be
Yeah.
honest with you. If you want to change, you want to become something better than what you are, you have to be dissatisfied with what you currently are enough to want to progress further,
And
right?
The problem that I have a lot of time is I am incredibly dissatisfied with my work, but it's checking all kinds of boxes and it's easy.
Well, it's always,
Everything else
it's
in my life
inertia,
has
right? I
changed.
mean, you know, an object in motion will stay in motion, an object, you know, at rest will want to stay at rest. So it's hard to make a change. I think the thing is when you get to a position where you are completely dissatisfied, really, really, truly unhappy with where you are, is where you get to the place where you start to make changes. You start to enact different things. You start to look at yourself. I mean, some people don't. They wallow in misery forever. But
Yeah.
there are some people.
I know lots of those.
Yeah,
Describe
that's
rock bottom.
that's the majority, right?
That's most of what I work with.
I mean, it could be rock bottom. I mean, everybody's rock bottom. I think rock bottom is somewhat subjective, right?
that's why some people never hit it.
Right? I would
Because
argue,
it's a sliding target.
compared to some people, I didn't hit rock bottom in the sense, I mean, I never ended up homeless. I was never like a full-blown addict of anything that would like impede my job or looking after my daughter or, you know, just kind of taking care of myself.
Rock bottom
But-
is different for each of us.
That's what I'm saying though, but I hit a point that was low enough that I still don't really like where I'm at currently with a number of things. But now instead of putting that out externally, and because I really did take on victim mentality for a long time, you know,
Fair.
these things have happened to me. You know, I'm helpless against it. I just the universe, the world things just didn't work out for me. This person did that, and that affected it. Just lately, and it's been a gradual thing, but it's I feel it's like an exponential growth thing. It started out small, but now I really feel like I'm in the midst of like actually assessing myself and trying to positively make changes. You know, looking at the laws of power thing. On its surface, it does. If you have any ethical, moral grounding at all, it seems like at first it seems like this is bad. Like this is you're getting into like danger, like the black magic of life, so to speak.
Yeah,
But I'm looking at it not from the perspective of I'm going to use all of these.
I've
tactics.
used a lot of that.
Oh, there are some where it
The
would make
black
sense.
magic, I've used a lot of that.
Well, there are some of these things that make sense that I could see using in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
But there's, I think it's almost as useful as that can be. It's useful in the sense that it can warn you and be. You can see it in other people when they're doing it to you.
That's
Right.
like the
I think-
biggest valuable thing.
I think that is because then you can recognize, you know, when you're being manipulated, when people are trying to get something from you, when
Oh yeah.
when you're being positioned for ulterior motives or someone else's
You can
purpose.
almost get a sniff of it. It's like
Yeah,
what
right.
bullshit.
Now, some people have that innately in them, right? You have a sense. You can read people. You can, you know, you feed off their emotions a little bit. You can kind of tell, you know, through subtle things, body language, or even just basic intuition. Things doesn't feel right. Not everybody has that though, and that's like to a sliding scale. Truth be told, I have pushed that down in myself for a lot of years. Because I question, no, that's, you want to see the best in people. You don't want to think that, somebody's doing something.
I don't
Malicious,
like
yeah.
to think that. I like to think of people broadly and see their flaws and their benefits, like their positives and negatives. I don't really ever put a shine on anyone. I don't try and see the best in people. I try and see them roundly.
Well, that's more where I want to be, where it's just.
People don't like that, though. People want you to be looking for only the good things. But
Well, that's what we're conditioned to now, right?
Yeah.
And that's like going down this whole road of self-improvement and whatnot. There's a lot of this self-help stuff that is just fluffy bullshit, right? It's just telling you what you want to hear. It's like, see the goodness in people, see the bad. And that's idealism. That's like what you want the world to be, but
I feel like it sets you up for a fail.
well,
Especially if you're looking
leaves
for
a blind
mate
spot.
or a partner.
Yeah.
Like if you're just looking at all the best in them.
I think it leaves blind spots.
Yeah.
Right? It's not necessarily bad to have a positive look at being a negative, hateful person all the time is not good.
No.
But being overly positive and seeing everything with rose-colored glasses is not good either, because I think it leaves you susceptible to, again, being taken advantage of, being let down, being hurt, all the rest. Things that you could mitigate if you were looking at things a little more rationally.
Exactly. And like you can be, can I make all of these pieces fit with me? Right? Like how do I make my flaws and my good parts and all of my whole package interact with this person's whole package rather than our best parts working together, and then God help us if our bad parts ever have to interact. I haven't even thought about those.
Do you hear how we talk about all this stuff though?
Good and bad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I knew you were going to
Black
go
and
there.
white, yeah. I mean, I think life is a sliding scale of gray, right? I've talked this about a lot of people. I think the idea of a 1 and 0, a binary, good, bad, black, white, I think that's too simplistic.
It is, but where I would go is like, I'll make it real simple. Like you're dealing with someone who they're a pretty good person. They're super accountable usually, but they have a drinking problem, right? So you just have to be aware of that, especially if you're scheduling or something at work.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put that person in a position of responsibility where they're the only one there or something. I would always have them as like the second man or something in the situation. I would just be scheduling around the people I have, not around he does a job really well. I would be scheduling in mind with like, well, he might just vanish on me, so I don't want to give him too much responsibility. Same time, I don't want to punish him too harshly for it, because I put him in a position I shouldn't have. In my mind, I expected things of him that he's already shown me I shouldn't expect.
Yeah, and
You know what I mean?
that becomes your problem for not recognizing the
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
That's I see bad management a lot of times, and the management will be blaming the employee, and it's like, no, you knew who the employee was. It's your fault now.
See, that's what you're describing in many respects is very good, which is just awareness, being able to see the world accurately. The thing that I want for everyone is to be able to see things as they are.
Yeah.
Because I think that's an easier way to then navigate your life, because then you're just not constantly lying to yourself. But that stuff, like awareness, starts with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
Like being able to see that in someone else, honestly, without judgment, just be like, this is what it is. That means that you've done that for yourself at some point.
Well, it's like, here's a great example. So we can boil it down really, really simple if it's not making sense to some people. If you leave a bag of food open in a room with a dog when you leave, and now you get mad at the dog when he gets into that food, it's like, oh, you little bastard.
Yeah.
No, you're the bastard. You left the fucking food there.
Yeah.
What's the dog going to do?
It's in the dog's nature.
It's in the dog's nature.
Yeah, and that's where you have to recognize what the animal
That's
is
the
dealing
way
with,
I
so to
try and
speak,
look at
when
everyone I
you're
interact with.
Yeah.
And I'm learning about people every minute I'm speaking to them.
Yeah.
They're giving me cues. They're telling me stories. You're picking out things that they're not telling you while they're talking even, or assessing it later sometimes. With just like, oh, I remember this conversation I had with so-and-so. And like, my mind is always doing stuff like that. I can't necessarily shut it off. Sometimes it's more active than others. But like, people give you cues. Like, you can't get mad at people for doing things that they were always going to do. That's why it's not a positive thing to give people the best foot every time.
Well, most people want to show you who they are. There's this desire for us,
Even if they don't realize
even if they don't realize
Yeah.
it. That's the thing, right? Like, we have this desire to, or a lot of people anyway, to, you want to show off everything you know. You want to let people know where you're coming from. People like to talk. People like to talk
Yeah.
about themselves specifically, right? So if you let people talk to you, they will tell you who they are, whether they realize it or not.
You just have to be listening.
You just have to sit
A lot
and
of
listen and
people-
let them talk.
A lot of people are just waiting for a chance to talk.
Well, that's it, right?
Like,
It's
it's like,
like you're thinking, you're sitting, instead of listening to someone, you're thinking about the thing you're going
Yeah.
to say next rather than listening to the.
Blah, 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 my line, blah, 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 my line.
Yeah.
Fuck what he has
My
to say.
line.
My
I just wait
line.
until he stops. So then
This is
I do
all
my
about.
line.
Sorry, I just watched The Man on the Moon last
Oh,
night.
funny.
And Tony Clifton comes in, he's reading his notes. He's like, "This is the speech I've been given to read." And they're like, "Yeah, this is your speech." He's like, "Oh, this looks like shit. I'm not going to read any of this." And he throws the papers up in the air and stomps on like a taxi and makes an ass of himself. It's not really relevant, but it was hilarious.
I liked it.
Where you're just like, yeah, he's blah, 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 my line, blah, blah, blah. I don't give a fuck what the other guy has to say. That's how a lot of people approach life.
Most.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The vast majority.
And it's
Right.
it's confusing to people who actually think that they're being heard sometimes.
Mhm.
It's like, you could have someone confiding to you their deepest, darkest secrets, and you're just like, sorry, what? Like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going to eat this taco right now.
I think that's part of it, is realizing that most people.
No.
I mean, when you come to the realization, no one cares.
I say it all the time.
and I say that sounds harsh,
Guess
but
who
at the end of
cares
the day,
less about you than you? Everyone.
everyone, yeah. I mean, you care the most about yourself, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. We don't.
I think that's the like good way to frame it. It's like everyone cares. It's just them first. It's like a hierarchy down.
100%.
And I think sometimes for people that their self fills a lot of the first few slots. You know what I mean? Like if you have a hierarchy of a list of
Yeah.
people that you care about, sometimes it's me, and then my dog. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of me in some people's lists.
It depends on your personality traits, how far you swing to on the more empathetic side or the more narcissistic side of life. Obviously, the more narcissistic you are, the more you. I mean, to some degree, we are the center of our own universes all the time. But for some people, that extends out further than others.
Can I ask a question?
Mm.
So, do you think people care about who they are, or do you think that they care about who they think they are?
Who they think they are. I think they care about their perception, because who you are changes when you're alone, it changes in the company you're around. Most people, whether they know it or not, have a tendency to mirror a little bit, some more than others. Some are aware of it as a tactic, some are not, some just do it inherently. You tend to shape more like who you're around, to some degree. Some people are very rigid and they don't, but I think more often than not, it's the perception of who you think people think you are,
Do you ever see
more so
yourself
than who you actually are.
speaking to a person a specific way that you wouldn't talk to anyone else?
Yep.
That and sometimes it's not even it's not a conscious. Oh, I need to talk to this person this way. It's just some things only make sense to some people. Like, why would I talk to someone about Star Wars that doesn't know anything about Star Wars, and I already know this? You know what I mean? Like, this person doesn't give a shit about this.
Well, okay, so
It's just a very obvious answer.
that's relationship, like really relating to someone, right? So, like, if you're, and not to mention, interest is not who you are.
Nope.
So it's a hard thing to try and describe, like, if you're going to say situationally, like, oh, I'm going to try and find things that we have in common. That's all relating. But in terms of, say you were to say, I'm going to talk about Star Wars because I have an interest in it and this person has an interest in it, and that's one way that we can bond. If that's one thing. If you're going to talk about Star Wars as if you like it and you hate it, and because you think this person is to relate to them, then also
Social lubricant.
That's just disingenuous.
Yeah.
And like, then the other side of it is like, I think that who you are is how you do. Because like, you can talk about anything, or the thing can change, whatever that is. It's like, those are all malleable, and they're not anything to do with who that person is. You know what I mean? Like you could have a traumatic brain injury and lose the ability to remember Star Wars. Then all of a sudden, you're not a guy who likes Star Wars anymore, but you're still you.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about the idea of actions versus words, that's what are they? Stoicism.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I've been looking into a little
We all have.
Marcus Aurelius.
That's a real tenet of this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, but that is kind of the core tenet of the whole thing, as I understand it, is the idea that, I mean, words are essentially meaningless. It's only actions that are
Words are dreams.
right. I mean, actions are like your true intent. Your
However, words aren't meaningless because if you don't portray a feeling the right way, not everybody's interested.
sorry, meaningless might not be
an action.
Yeah. No, meaningless is close to the right word.
Yeah, it's
So they're just it's ethereal, right? Like it's because words can be both true and false. Actions are true.
well,
Like you can't lie in an action.
because people will tell you what people say is how they want you to think of them.
Exactly.
But how they act is showing you how they truly are. Right? Your actions. People will say all kinds of things and then just do what they normally do.
Yep.
Right?
That's one of the things I keep saying to people is you're going to do whatever you're going to do.
Well, they are,
I'm
right?
stuck on that sentence. But
Well,
it's like,
unless you are actually like.
I know why you're stuck on this. That's just working
Yeah.
here around certain people.
you're going to do what you're going to do, man.
Yeah, I could definitely tell why that's in your mind.
Yeah.
Well, it's because some people don't self-reflect, right? And if you never look inward at yourself and then say, okay, what have I done wrong, or how have my actions gotten me to the position that I'm in? How have I caused what's going on around me, and what can I do to?
Well, I don't think
change
anybody's
that
ever
in a
turned
positive
left.
way,
Like a lot of people never go the other way, where they're about to go the same way they always go,
but- Mhm.
and then they go, no, that's never gonna fucking work. How many times do we need to go in this circle before I go, no, I'm going this way this time?
And so many people, they never realize that that's the thing,
You
right?
do
That's
that
the issue.
that left turn a few times in your life because it's not gonna happen often. Like
Could.
potentially could happen.
Psychedelics.
Well, I mean, sometimes you get forced into it, right? Like a tragedy happens. That's they say the
More
impermanence.
often induced on you.
Yeah, like the impermanence of life, right? Like nothing is permanent. Nothing you have like. I guess that's something else I've been looking into because I mean, honestly, like I've fallen into the trap of perceived security so many times in my life, jobs, relationships, the idea that like, oh, I've got this thing, I don't want to lose it. I'm afraid if I do anything, I
don't want to rock the boat.
don't want to rock the boat. I don't want to lose this thing. But the thing is, you have no control over that in the end because if it's a relationship, they could leave you, they could die. If it's a job, you could get fired. The business could go under. I mean,
The entire economy of
the
the world.
entire economy could fall apart. I mean, there could be a natural disaster that just throws society into upheaval. Like none of it's permanent. So the idea that you can have any control over that, and I've suffered from this, like trying to keep control.
I think the reason why a lot of times people will feel safe in those sorts of situations, we'll go relationship or a long-term job, for examples, it's more work to go another way for everyone.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
it's hard to take a path out.
Not to mention work, but just it's unknown. Like our
Well, it's
genetics,
uncomfortable.
like
Yeah.
the way our biology is wired, we don't like unknown.
Like, imagine, though, like, here's a great scenario. You might know who I'm talking about. Imagine you're living with a woman. It's the only woman you've ever lived with, and it's been 2 years, right?
Okay, I know where we're going
Well,
with
I
this
don't need
already.
to give a name.
No, I know.
And neither one of you touches each other anymore. It hasn't in a long time, and it wasn't even that hot to begin with. Like, and now you're just doing this because it's too hard to think about moving
I'm
out.
supposed to be there about 12 years in.
Yeah.
And that's when.
Yeah, that's what it
But,
really
like,
falls.
the
That's when the
idea-
shit falls. Yeah.
The idea of getting your
I'm
stuff
assuming
physically
that,
out of that
but-
place is difficult. It's like, oh god, that sounds like a lot of work.
It is.
Right, but
It's
like,
so much work.
imagine how many relationships are holding together because of that. Imagine how many people are
It's a
working
trope, man. Stay together for the kids.
the same job because of that same thing.
I was that guy. I was that guy. I mean, it's only been recently, like, and I mean, like, within the last couple of weeks that I've, like, come to the, I mean, there's a part of me that thought I had pushed past it and wasn't resentful about, you know, being the one who got left in, you know, in my marriage. But now I'm looking at it and knowing the trajectory I'm on now, that I've set myself on, and believing that I can do what I think I can do, I'm actually, in my head, I haven't said it to her, but I need to thank her.
I did the
To
same
be perfectly honest, because if it were not for that disruption in the chain of my life, I would just be a guy sitting watching TV, doing whatever, happy to be just going to work and
kind
and now,
purposeless.
right? And it's taken, we're talking almost 4 years.
Takes longer the longer you're with the person.
Yeah, for it to really set in that it's like, no, this was good in the long run. In the short term, this really fucking sucks. And it's like, financially, I got destroyed. Emotionally, I felt like my life came crashing down. I felt like I had nothing. Really, other than my daughter, I felt like I had nothing. I wasn't doing music. I wasn't doing anything creative. My circle of friends had shrunk to nothing. I was becoming an alcoholic, honestly. And it took, like, skidding the rocks, so to speak, and then eventually, like I said, being uncomfortable enough with my own life and just, you know, I shouldn't say I hate myself and I hate my life, but to a certain degree I do, and it's dissatisfaction, and it's forcing me to make myself better because it's the only option. No one's going to come along and save me. No one's going to come along. There's no woman that's going to make me happy. There's no working for someone else that's going to do it. I have to follow the path of what I believe is going to make me happy.
A lot of things that go into it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a multifaceted thing, right? Like, it's got to be, I got to check this box, and I got to check this, all this thing's still fucked. I still have to fix this thing. I'm still working on that same thing myself for the last 5 years. Like, I've still got the shitty job.
Okay, so, question.
That's the last thing for me to do, I think.
So, here's the interesting question. So, culturally, we don't talk in a way that enables us to do this type of analysis and this working through and this, like, letting go of old ways of doing things. Culturally, we don't. We just don't talk about it. And especially as guys, the idea is that you just don't, like, you fucking drink for a little while and you just get over it.
You
go find someone new and it just is what it is.
Bust someone's nose or something, get in a couple fights, you know.
Yeah. Any of the classic Clint Eastwood tropes.
Yeah.
Like that. So if you had developed that ability from an early age, the idea to let go of things and see them as change and gratitude and kind of understand that as you go through different situations and different changes in your life, you're going to go through mourning stages, and we allow people to engage in mourning in in a good way,
engaging with rather than languishing.
Or escaping from.
But a point on that is, like, the part about being men and not grieving properly or ever really being told to.
Yeah.
Like, I think that's part of why women leave more often. Like, I think they're better at processing things going wrong and making the choice. This is more wrong than it is right, because almost every meaningful relationship I've had, the woman has left. And true to your point where you said you should thank your ex, Tika and I were together twice.
And when I brought her back the second time, like, I interrupted her life, and she came here to be with me the second time. She left me again for different reasons. So that relationship was probably never going to work.
No.
She tried to talk to me again a year later. It was just after I got with Sarah. She sent me this big, long message, like, I'm sorry the way I left and all these different things.
Yeah.
By that point, I had finally realized that the relationship wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
Because it took me, the first time we split up was 2011, and that was 2016, this final talk we had. And I told her, I was like, I wasn't ready to accept it when you left, but you were right.
Yeah.
And thank you for realizing it before I did, because we're never like, regardless of how much love may have been there, some people just can't put it together.
Well, certain personality types don't work together, right?
Well, and in
As I'm
some
learning.
ways, it can work too well. And with her and I, it was like, it was either working way too well or way too poorly. There was no,
See, then I would argue that it's working poorly.
yeah, but
Right?
it's
Because
that-
if it's working, because I could say the same thing about mine. Like when times were good, but when times were bad, they were bad, right?
Exactly.
So, but that ultimately it meant times were not good enough to keep it going.
It's not good for
so
your
I don't think it
well-being.
was good, right?
and that's what I started focusing more on, was like, even when I met Sarah, it was like, I've said it before, but the hardest part of our relationship is I'm a little bored with her sometimes with how things are just smooth. Like, it's just, there's not a whole lot of this. It's more like, yeah, we have good days. We don't have these nut show up and downs. And for someone who's been doing that their whole life, it's really difficult. And because my formative years were always like this. So I'm looking for that with everyone I meet, and consciously steering away from that. Like,
At all times.
I need to stay away from the insanity that I'm used to.
See, it's funny because I had the opposite thing. Because Robin and I never fought.
Oh, wow.
Ever.
See, that is where
Until it
we're a
was
little
over.
different, because
Until it was over. like,
So my only thing would be probably, but at the same time, because like I did a similar thing. Like we never fought other than when it was something cataclysmic that was from another reason. But like actual living, no fighting. But the way that I look back on for me is that because I was playing too much of the keep everything smooth.
yeah.
Like if I was being me and genuinely living my life the direction that I
you would have
actually
been
wanted
having
to,
more of those spikes.
Yeah.
See, that's what I was
Yeah.
trying to negotiate the whole time with all these different women that I was engaged 4 times before I was with Sarah. And it was always
lot of
like,
rings.
I want to be me at all costs.
Yeah.
But like, I'm finding people who are not okay with a lot of what that entails.
Yeah.
And then it's doing this, because it's like, I'm not giving up myself.
Well, and that's the rub of the personality types, right? Like I've been digging deeper into this side of things too. Again, trying to understand myself, but it's given me more of a perspective of what I would be looking for now in a potential partner,
course.
right? Whether that's like a relationship or whether that's just like friendships or people that I want to work with. There's certain personality types that will work really well with me and some that won't, right? The more I learn about myself, the more it teaches me about what I would need to have from somebody else to both complement what I already bring to the table, so to speak, and to fill in those gaps of what I don't.
well, and you take on like you're kind of the a bit of the amalgamation of those around you, because those are the parts of you that are getting encouraged by those who are around you, right? Like, because if you're keeping people in your circle that are down and miserable,
Yeah.
guess what? It's going to bring out all your down and miserable.
Yeah.
Right? So it's like it's almost less about like surrounding yourself with people that complement you entirely. It's more about understanding the way that your life, like the parts of you and the parts of your life that you want to encourage, and finding people that help push those things out into the world, because they have them. You have that shared attribute.
Yeah, so when I say compliment, I don't mean like you just, you're agreeable. I mean parts of like core tenets of your, that don't rub against
No,
each other, right? Because
but, like,
there
what
are
I'm
certain
saying-
things that that you can't get past, right? Like
Yeah, of course.
I was with somebody, the last actual relationship I was in, now it's a couple of years ago almost at this point, but we got along really, really well. We didn't have any like personal, everything was good except that like what she, like her pastimes, her mentality, like the things that were fun for her were not for me.
Yeah.
And vice versa, right? So we had a very, it's just something that wasn't going to work. Do you know what I mean? Like it just
'Kay.
wasn't going to.
Question. So wouldn't work for what? Like, what is so? One of the things that I find interesting, but my question is still the same, is when we're talking about the idea of a relationship, I feel like, especially in terms of romantic, in terms of one partner, all of a sudden the breadth of what that person needs to encompass to work for us, I feel gets too big. So it's like, because it's like, pastimes. Okay, pastimes, just things that you do for fun. Is that a requirement of a relationship as we know it?
Yeah, sorry. I guess pastime might be the more superficial extension of it, but it's our core personalities were different in a couple of ways that just wouldn't allow us to mesh. That I could see resentments.
Yeah, building
because of I'm not going to enjoy necessarily devoting all of my free time to the types of things that would keep her interested and happy, and vice versa. In fact, there's certain things that I, enjoy doing that she's very morally, was strictly nope, not interested. And I mean, I'm not talking anything crazy here, but she wouldn't, the idea of drinking at all, right? Or smoking weed at all. Her mom would, was a bit of a,
Well, it's like imagining
hit the sauce every night kind of thing, and she
me
grew
trying
up
to
around,
make
didn't
the
like
pieces fit with someone who absolutely hates tattoos.
right? Yeah,
luck
that's
with
what
that.
I mean, right?
That's hilarious.
For example,
Yeah. But it's a great example.
well, I guess one of the issues was now, everything that I'm doing is centered around music at this point in time. One of her daughters had mentioned that she wanted to play guitar, and that kind of irked her. She'd rather her play, if she's going to get into an instrument, play the violin or the piano, because she
something
doesn't
classy.
want wouldn't want her in that rock world, right? You know what I mean? So it's okay, you could look at that and go, well, that's just music, that's whatever, but that's kind of a core
If it's part of
me,
your identity,
right?
it's not
Yeah.
just music.
Exactly. It's just like tattoos for
Well,
you, right?
Well, but music has always been a part of your.
Yeah.
And you were probably at your lowest points when you didn't have that.
Exactly.
Right? So when you get
Exactly.
into a relationship with someone that doesn't care about music or is anti your music, you're going to be suppressing yourself to keep that person happy.
And that was the issue, right? I found
Yeah.
myself trying to play a role where it's I'm being somebody, I'm being more like work me. You know what I mean? I was.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That in terms of that people pleasing thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Probably why there was no fighting is because one of you was pushing yourself down, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, with Rob, yeah. That was totally, and that was me, right? Well, I mean, I'm sure she did too, but
If you're
Someone
both
does,
being 100% or as close to 100% who you are, and those people don't necessarily work together, you're going to fight.
Okay, so
or even if you don't fight, it's just gonna
There's
something doesn't
going to be friction.
right. Yeah.
yes, okay, yes. What I'm saying that I'm curious about is that is because if I'm reading it correctly, that's because culturally we have a picture of all the things that person is supposed to be able to
We've given our
love
partner
about
too much
us.
weight.
Or the idea that this is one of those things that and whenever I look at fairy tales now, because most things are presented as fairy tales, they're magical solutions to complicated problems, and in terms of a relationship, we give it this oh, you got to find your person, someone that makes you feel complete and whole. You should feel complete and whole alone.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
We don't tell that shit to no one. So what happens if all of a sudden you're on this search for this magical human being that has to like everything that you like for some fucking reason, otherwise you're going to go insane, and then they need to do everything that you want them to do and be everything that you this idea that this other person somehow exists out there and they happen to live within 40 kilometers of you at that time, that's the type of stuff that you give kids.
Yeah. No, and that's not what I'm arguing towards.
No, I know. I'm just saying that how much of the way that we view other people is less about who they are and more about will they be able to enable me?
What kind
in
of a
the things that I
compliment
want
are they
to
to
do?
me?
Well,
kind of thing.
it's saviorism.
Yeah.
Right. At its core, it's the whole idea. And I mean, like as a culture, as people, we've indoctrinated ourselves with religion over the centuries in such a way that like someone else will be
someone else is the answer.
Someone else is the answer, right?
Yeah.
So of
you're
course
you're gonna live in that question forever. But there's an answer that is outside.
So
of you.
we've done this at a level that like most people have to find a way to break out of that. Like not many people aren't indoctrinated with that to begin with.
Yeah.
But that as a society, we've conditioned ourselves into the. I mean, you look at it now. Like, what are the most popular movies going? Superhero movies.
Yeah.
The idea that somebody more powerful, greater than you, is going to come down and wipe the problems away and fix it and make it good, right? So of course we're conditioned to look for that in a partner. The idea, somebody else is going to complete me, and like there's nothing in our society that preaches self-empowerment. We don't do it politically. We don't do it spiritually through religion. We don't do it through corporatism. The idea is that you're not good enough and you need something else to fix you. All of it,
Well,
every
like
step in the line. Everything we've built our society on is built on this premise that you're not enough and you need something else to make you enough, whether that's a person, a thing, a place, a whatever, stature, money, anything, right? You need something else. You're not good enough. And I think we've conditioned ourselves, again, it works for people who understand it to maintain a certain level of power and authority over others who don't, because you can turn that and you can feed on people's insecurities and their weaknesses and what they feel their deficiencies are to turn. You need this thing.
It feels
you need
perverse
this to
at
make
times,
you
though.
whole.
I've said this before.
It is.
Sometimes
It's a whole.
when you're
It's super
when you're
perverse.
understanding your intentions towards someone and they're not, you feel like you're doing something criminal.
Yeah,
Or-
it's
like-
you're playing with knowing the rules, and they're playing with not knowing the
yeah,
rules.
like,
you know what I
and
mean?
you know very well what you want from this person, and you can almost see, like, clear as day how to get it from them. And then it's like, holy shit, I'm a monster.
Okay, so
I think it's what you do with that.
Oh yeah,
Agreed.
Is
exactly,
the thing, right?
but-
Because if you have a certain sense of morality, I mean, and I guess morality even somewhat objective, but if you generally let's call it morality, just for the sake of not having to parse this all out, but if you have a certain sense of right and wrong, you can take these ideas and they're just tools, right? These are they're all just things. You can use them for good, bad, what have you. I think a lot of people who have an understanding of this are people that are naturally drawn to the idea of power and
it goes well.
right? Like it pairs well with it. So those like the people that they say a person who seeks a position of leadership is generally a person who should not have leadership.
Yeah.
The best person to be the president is somebody who doesn't want to be the president, probably, right? Somebody who really wants to be the president of the United States probably shouldn't, because
There's something darker at the
there's
core
something
of that.
darker at the core of it.
Yeah.
But that being said, if you can take those same principles that these people are using and have used for centuries and apply them in a way that does allow you to get what you want out of life, but you are conscious to not step on others and not to, destroy people along the way.
You're kind of describing some tenets of Satanism there. Where it's
Yeah,
like
possibly.
empowering yourself.
Yeah,
as long as
self-empowerment,
it's
yeah.
not at the cost of anyone else. Do what you want.
don't do harm to others.
Yeah, don't do harm to others, but make
Empower
your own
yourself.
God. Become your own God.
And
Is the idea
I don't
there.
see anything necessarily inherently wrong with that, as
No.
long as it doesn't spill out to where you are.
It's a thin line.
It is a thin line, and I think you have to watch yourself.
Because when you
right?
start because I always tell people they should be a little more greedy.
Yeah.
Like I see people living very safe lives where they don't want to upset anyone, but they're not happy.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, you need to be a little more greedy, motherfucker.
I
You
think
need to take a
I
Not
think
even
the words
greed,
are
but-
bad.
That's
I think
a bad word.
those are bad descriptors for it. But
But-
I agree. I understand. what you're
saying greedy, I think I think the idea is not to be at the core. People are afraid of failure. right? So if you're,
I think core, they're afraid of death.
well, they're afraid of
maybe.
death, but I mean, but failing at, your job or whatever, you're gonna not have
You could
money.
call
You're
death
gonna
failure
start.
at life.
Right. Well, sure. Right.
Shit, I failed.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's you're worried about your safety, you're worried about your comfort, you're worried about all the rest.
Yeah.
You don't, but a lot of people don't even know how much they can chew. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that saying, bite off, I
More than
bit
you
off
can chew.
more than I could chew. How the fuck do you know? You've never even taken a bite.
Yeah.
Like, again?
Mm-hmm.
This is going to take some getting used to.
Well, I mean, that's like you can put that into like the idea of like working out or whatever. It's like if you're working out by yourself, you're more likely, oh, that's all I got in me. But if you got somebody else there, come on, man,
Yeah.
more, you can get more, you
I
can
do
get
it
more,
the other
you can
way.
get more.
If I'm working out by myself, I hurt myself. I'll do way more than I should. I don't know what's wrong with me. but
Generally, that's not
I go the
how
other
it
way.
works. Usually,
I
it's the
know.
opposite.
I know,
Usually
it's
people are
ridiculous.
The opposite. But,
It's ridiculous. I have such a problem. I don't know why.
Yeah, I mean, you could apply that to anything, though. Anytime there's an audience, you're more likely to try and harder to impress people.
Usually, right? Usually, unless you are a very self-motivated individual who's
Yeah.
like very focused.
Well,
and
you
very,
can be self-motivated. That doesn't mean you're going to finish.
No.
Right?
No, not necessarily.
I started, and I can tell people I did. They will never know I didn't.
But I mean, that's another one of the plan, whatever you're doing, plan to its conclusion, plan to the end. Make a plan to the end and follow it to the end. But then don't extend past. Know when the end is also, and not to extend yourself too far afterwards.
Although I do find that concept adorable, because when has that ever been the case? When has a plan ever gone to plan? Like in a larger, like as things get bigger and bigger, like there's always deviation. There's always things that you didn't take into account.
And
There's
that's-
natural movement
yeah,
and stuff.
that-
It's like I always find that idea of trying to plan. I love the idea of it because it allows you to try and sit where you are, take in as many variables and as much possibilities as you can, and to try and predict, like make a good
What you're
guess.
describing is me coming in for an appointment with Rick.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You make a good guess.
Yeah,
it's like if I show
think
up,
he'll be here,
he may be here, and we may get tattooed. Maybe
and it's not because he does it all the time. It's just I'm with Rick.
you're
Rick is
taking
a-
into account the variables.
He's a known variable.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's why, as they say, be formless, right? It's the Bruce Lee, be water.
Water.
Be water, right? So, I mean, you make a plan and plan it out, but at the same time, be water. So that whether if you're in a cup, you take the shape of the cup. If you're in the bottle, you take the shape of the bottle. So you have to be, the idea is not to be rigid and fragile, right? You have to be able to be malleable and change with things. But at the same time, what was another good quote, that if you have no destination, it doesn't matter which way the winds are blowing. No direction of the wind blowing helps you if you have no
wind is favorable.
No wind is favorable if
Yeah.
you don't know what port you're trying to get to.
Yeah.
Right. So if you're aimless in your pursuit of whatever if you don't know where you're trying to end up, you're not going to get there either. Right.
Yeah.
But don't be so rigid that you can't make adjustments and you know.